Consider a second while you realize you may now not fake. The mask you have worn for many years unexpectedly experience suffocating. The games each person's playing end up transparently apparent. The life you've got constructed begins to experience like a jail manufactured from other humans' expectancies. You are now not depressed, you're waking up, and with that awakening comes a slow, inevitable losing of the entirety that is not honestly you. Carl Jung spent his whole lifestyles documenting this procedure. He watched thousands of human beings rework spiritually and noticed something profound. Genuine religious increase would not manifest through dramatic declarations or surprising changes. It happens through a sluggish releasing, a gradual quitting of styles that after felt like survival, however now feel like suffocation. Nowadays we're exploring the 7 matters Jung. Take a look at that fairly religious human beings slowly, nearly involuntarily stop as they awaken. These are not aware choices before everything. They're more like hypersensitive reactions to inauthenticity that receives more potent as your spirit receives clearer. You do not wake up one day finding out to end this stuff. You wake up in the future figuring out you already have. If you've been feeling such as you cannot engage with lifestyles the way you used to, like you're becoming incompatible with regular life. That is why your spirit is slowly rejecting the entirety that isn't always aligned along with your fact. And in keeping with Jung, this rejection isn't always simplest inevitable, it is essential in your transformation. The first factor highly religious humans slowly give up is the desperate hunger for approval. Not because they determined to, however, due to the fact something shifts in their psychological structure that makes approval in search of bodily uncomfortable. Believe you've got spent your complete existence ingesting sugar, and unexpectedly your body develops an intolerance. That is what happens spiritually. The approval you once craved starts off evolved, making you ill. Jung watched this in patient after affected person. As they advanced spiritually, they had document ordinary discomfort in conditions where they used to seek validation. A female who lived for her mom's approval all of a sudden felt nauseous whilst trying to please her. A man who needed constant expert popularity observed himself unable to care about promotions. Now not from rebellion, from evolution. Right here's what's surely happening. As you expand spiritually, you begin to get right of entry to what Jung known as yourself. Your proper true center that exists beyond ego. This self does not want approval as it's already entire. It's like a tree that's found groundwater. It no longer relies upon rain, but the quitting procedure is sluggish and often painful. You will find yourself in an assembly approximately to mention what every person desires to pay attention, and all at once you can't. The phrases get stuck. Your frame rebels. You may even damage into a sweat. It's no longer anxiety. It's your actual self refusing to participate in the overall performance. One in every of Jung's sufferers described it perfectly. I used to rearrange my whole persona relying on who I was with. Now, after I attempt, it's like my soul hits an emergency spoil. I bodily cannot contort myself for approval anymore. This creates a strange period wherein you've stopped in search of approval internally, but haven't adjusted externally. You stop posting for likes, but still test your cell phone. You prevent fishing for compliments, but nevertheless word their absence. You're among worlds, no longer addicted to approval, but no longer but relaxed without it. Jung found that this transition typically takes years. First you end in search of approval from strangers, then from buddies, then from pals. Finally, and maximum difficult, from own family. Every layer of launch brings each freedom and grief. You're not just quitting a conduct, you are quitting an identity. The girl who lived for her mom's approval went through months of what felt like withdrawal. She had routinely reached for her smartphone to name her mom for validation. Then recollect, she couldn't do this anymore. Now not because her mother wasn't to be had, but because her soul would not allow her make the decision. Her arms might actually shake whilst she attempted. However, right here's the stunning element. Jung documented, because the starvation for approval dies, something else is born, an unshakable sense of inner well-worth, no longer confidence, which nonetheless references others, but really worth which references only itself. You forestall desiring others to validate your life because you, in the end, feel your existence from within. That is why rather spiritual humans regularly seem mysteriously assured. They may be no longer trying to be. They have got definitely end the arduous recreation of earning their right to exist via others' approval. They have got located what Jung called inner authority, a compass that points authentic regardless of outside evaluations. The second one aspect religious humans slowly give up shocks many humans. The want to be special. That is counterintuitive because aren't non-secular people alleged to know they may be particular? Sure, but there may be a profound difference between knowing your area of expertise and needing to be unique. Jung discovered that as humans develop spiritually, they undergo what looks like a paradox. They come to be more unique while caring less approximately being unique. They end up extra themselves even as desiring less popularity for it. They end up wonderful by quitting the want to be visible as super. Right, here's what takes place. Early in spiritual development, people often experience what Jung witnessed as non-secular inflation. They've an authentic awakening revel in and all of sudden experience chosen, unique, advanced. They've visible truth others have not. They've touched dimensions others cannot reach. They realize matters others don't. And for a while, this sense of specialness appears like religious fulfillment. You would possibly discover yourself subtly or not so subtly letting others recognize about your meditation practice, your synchronicities, your spiritual insights. You're now not precisely bragging, but you are definitely differentiating yourself from the unconscious hundreds. But then something shifts. Jung found this shift in each absolutely non-secular character he studied. The need to be special begins to feel heavy, onerous, fake, like sporting a fancy dress that after felt like wings however now looks like chains. A man Jung treated had constructed his whole identification round being spiritually superior. He became the only pals got hereto for expertise, the one who constantly had the deepest insight, the one who contemplated longer, fasted harder, knew greater approximately cognizance than absolutely everyone else. Then someday, in the middle of explaining a few profound spiritual idea, he just stopped. Mid-sentence, he later advised Jung, I unexpectedly saw myself from out of doors, and I, regarded ridiculous. I used to be the usage of spirituality to be special, which is the opposite of religious. This recognition begins the gradual cease. You begin catching yourself about to percentage your non-secular studies for the hit of specialness, about to drop recommendations about your focus stage, about to put yourself as greater wakened than others. And whenever you catch yourself, it turns into tougher to maintain. The end manifests in diffused approaches. You prevent bringing up your spiritual practices except at once requested. You lose interest in comparing focus stages. You end wanting others to realize about your insights. You grow to be comfortable being visible as normal. You stop the usage of non-secular language to raise yourself. One female defined her transition. I used to need every person to understand I was one of kind, deeper, extra conscious. Now I am happy to be invisible. Being special turned into a jail. Being nobody is freedom. But here's what Jung discovered fascinating. As human beings stop wanting to be unique, they come to be definitely specific. Now not performatively specific, authentically particular. When you forestall seeking to stand out, your actual nature clearly distinguishes itself. When you quit performing your specialness, your real unique qualities emerge. Jung called this individuation without inflation. You come to be completely yourself while not having all and sundry to note. You are like a flower that blooms whether all of us is looking or no longer. The blooming is for the blooming, no longer for the watching. This shift terrifies the ego, which has frequently constructed its whole structure on being special. If I am no longer unique, the ego asks, then what am I? The answer, which takes years to absolutely receive, you are you. It really is sufficient. That's the entirety. The 1/3 issue, rather spiritual human stop, is perhaps the maximum sudden. The overall performance of happiness, not happiness itself, the performance of it, the steady want to seem fantastic, enlightened past suffering. Jung found that actual religious development doesn't make people continually glad. It makes them continuously real, and truth consists of the overall spectrum of human enjoy. Joy and sorrow, peace and turmoil, light and shadow. In our tradition, there's full-size stress to be satisfied, mainly in case you're religious. You're purported to be above terrible feelings, beyond petty issues, radiating love and light at all times. However, Jung found this overall performance of happiness is absolutely anti-non-secular. It is some other mask, simply with a spiritual face. As people broaden actual non-secular depth, they slowly quit this exhausting performance. They forestall, pretending the whole lot is pleasant when it is not. Stop forcing smiles whilst they're grieving. Stop spouting high-quality affirmations while they may be honestly suffering. They give up the spiritual pass and embody the non-secular embodiment. A therapist Jung supervised went through this transition dramatically. She'd built her exercise on being the enlightened healer, continually focused, always peaceful, always radiating understanding. Then her son died, and she could not perform anymore. She attempted to go back to work with her religious personality intact, but her body would not let her. She'd sit with clients seeking to be the clever healer, and tears could simply begin falling. She told Jung, idea being religious meant transcending human ache. Now I understand it means embracing it. I cannot be the enlightened one anymore. I will most effective be the real one. In case you're spotting yourself in these patterns, if you're feeling that slow launch of factors you used to grip tightly, I need you to recognize you're no longer alone. This adventure of slowly quitting what now not serves us is taking place to tens of millions of awakening souls right now. Before we explore the ultimate 4 things spiritual human beings give up, take a moment to subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell to join our network of souls who are courageously losing the fake to embrace the real. And please proportion within the feedback what you found yourself slowly quitting. Your story is probably precisely what a person else desires to hear today. Permits maintain this adventure collectively because the subsequent styles might be the very ones you are experiencing right now. The 4th thing pretty spiritual people slowly give up might be the maximum destabilizing. The need for reality, the determined grip on understanding, expertise, having answers. Jung found that authentic spiritual increase leads not to more answers, but to being at ease with questions. Now, not to more certainty, but to peace with thriller. Not to understanding, however, to wonder. This terrifies the mind which has spent a lifetime amassing certainties like armor. I know who I'm. I realize what is genuine. I know how lifestyles works. I know what takes place after death. I understand my reason. These certainties experience like protection. However, Jung located there simply prisons. As spiritual intensity develops, these certainties begin to crack. No longer due to the fact they're validated incorrect. However, due to the fact you recognize the very want for truth turned into keeping you from reality, truth is not something you could keep. It's something that flows. The moment you grip it, it turns into dogma. One of Jung's maximum incredible sufferers become a physicist who got here to him in disaster. His spiritual awakening had shattered his medical certainties. He stated, "I used to recognize how the universe worked. Now I understand I do not even recognize how my coffee cup works. The extra conscious I grow to be, the less certain I'm approximately something." This wasn't confusion. It became clarity. He became seeing past the phantasm of understanding into the fact of mystery. However, the transition became agonizing. His mind desperately wanted to rebuild certainty, to locate new spiritual data, to update the old clinical ones. However, every time he attempted to crystallize a religious fact, it'd dissolve. Jung watched him slowly end the want. Solid ground. First, he quit needing to know how things work. Then, he ended needing to know why matters occur. Subsequently, he ended wanting to recognize who he virtually became. He entered what Jung recognized because the cloud of unknowing, a kingdom where no longer knowing will become greater, sincere than any understanding might be. This quitting of reality takes place in levels. First, you give up truth approximately the outside world. Then you definitely cease certainty about others' motivations. You then cease actuality about your personal past. In the end, you quit actuality, approximately your personal identity. Every level of launch brings both terror and liberation. The ego reports it as demise, which it's far the dying of the recognize it. All thoughts that kept you secure but small. A lady described her procedure. "I used to have sturdy reviews about the whole thing. Politics, spirituality, relationships, reason. Now when a person asks what I agree with, I honestly don't know. Now not from confusion, however from openness. Each truth I release creates area for something extra stunning than solutions. Presence with what is." Jung found that those who effectively give up fact broaden something excellent, the potential to keep paradox. They are able to agree with contradictory things simultaneously while not having resolution. They are able to act decisively without being sure. They could commit absolutely while staying open to being absolutely incorrect. This isn't always wishy-washy relativism. It is what Jung witnessed as spiritual maturity, the popularity that truth is greater than any intellectual model can comprise. You stop fact now not because not anything is actual, but because reality is too alive to be caged in ideas. The fifth component, distinctly non-secular human beings slowly give up, is one of the hardest: blame. Not simply blaming others, however, the whole sufferer-perpetrator narrative that the ego uses to make experience of suffering. Jung discovered that as humans increase spiritually, they undergo a radical shift in how they relate to their wounds. They forestall seeing themselves as victims of others' moves and begin seeing themselves as contributors in a larger sample. This is not approximately excusing damage or bypassing trauma. It is approximately reclaiming strength. The quitting of blame is slow and frequently painful because blame serves such a lot of mental functions. It explains our ache. It preserves our innocence. It offers us an identification. It bonds us with others who have been in addition wronged. Letting passive blame can sense like letting move of our whole tail. A female came to Jung full of valid grievances, abusive early life, betraying ex-husband, discriminating employers. Her anger turned into justified, her blame accurate, but it changed into also killing her. She changed into so diagnosed with being wronged that she could not pass forward. Through years of labor, Jung watched her slowly stop blame, now not with the aid of denying what took place or forgiving prematurely, however with the aid of recognizing her very own participation in styles. She noticed how she unconsciously selected companions who might betray her, jobs that could discriminate, conditions that could affirm her sufferer identification. She instructed Jung, "The day I stopped blaming turned into the day I became loose. Not because others were not wrong, they were, but because I sooner or later saw that preserving directly to blame become my desire. I was using their wrongness to keep away from my own responsibility for my lifestyles. This shift is excruciating for the ego. It means taking obligation for matters that surely weren't your fault. It means seeing the way you unconsciously participated in your personal wounding. It way admitting that on some stage you wanted the very reviews you have spent years blaming others for." Younger documented the degrees of quitting blame. 1. Rage at the unfairness. This shouldn't have took place. Reputation of patterns. This maintains occurring. 3. Seeing subconscious participation. I somehow make a contribution to this. 4. Taking radical duty. I'm the writer of my revel in. 5. Transcending the victim-perpetrator paradigm. We're all playing roles in each other's awakening. A person who'd spent decades blaming his father for his struggles went via this technique. He stated, "I realized I'd made my father right into a monster to avoid seeing my personal shadows. The day I quit blaming him, I saw him simply for the first time. Simply some other wounded human doing his fine along with his own trauma. And I noticed myself definitely too. Not a victim, but a soul who chose this precise father for my personal evolution. This doesn't imply accepting abuse or staying in dangerous conditions. It method spotting that even our wounds serve our awakening. Jung located that those who end blame don't come to be doormats. They become powerful. They stop giving others the power to outline their tale." The sixth issue religious humans end is specially diffused religious bypassing. The use of religious standards to keep away from actual human revel in non-secular practices to escape hard feelings, enlightenment as an approach to past being human. Jung noticed this continuously in spiritual groups, humans using meditation to keep away from feeling. The use of the whole lot occurs for a reason to keep away from grief, using we're all one to avoid boundaries. The usage of ego demise to keep away from mental paintings. The religious course becoming another difficult defense mechanism. As actual spiritual maturity develops, this bypassing becomes not possible. Your soul demands full embodiment, non-secular and human, transcendent and forthcoming, infinite and intimate. You cannot use heaven to get away earth. A Buddhist practitioner came to Jung after 2 decades of meditation. He'd done high-quality states of recognition, skilled profound vacancy, contact the void. However, his relationships have been screw-ups. His emotions have been numbed. His lifestyles was dissociated. He'd used enlightenment to bypass his humanity. Jung watched him slowly cease this skip. It was greater painful than his unique awakening. He needed to go into reverse into his body, into his emotions, into his very human needs and dreams. After touching the countless, he had to learn to be finite once more. After experiencing no self, he had to rebuild a healthy self. He defined it. "I thought spirituality turned into approximately transcending human enjoy. Now I recognize it is about in the end having human experience. I spent 20 years trying to be nobody. Now I am getting to know to be someone. This unique anyone with this precise existence." Those specific wounds and items. The quitting of non-secular bypassing looks like admitting you've got preferences, notwithstanding accepting what is. Feeling anger despite information everybody's doing their exceptional. Looking intimacy regardless of understanding we are already one. Having boundaries in spite of seeing all as self. Experiencing fear notwithstanding trusting the universe. This creates what Jung located as non-secular maturity, the ability to be fully human and completely non-secular concurrently. Not the usage of one to break out the opposite, however dwelling on intersection where heaven meets earth. The final component particularly religious human beings quit may marvel you. The isolation of awakening, the notion that non-secular increase way developing aside from others, that consciousness creates loneliness, that awakening method being by myself. Jung found that whilst religious boom frequently calls for periods of solitude, real non-secular adulthood leads return to connection. However, connection of a completely different excellent. Now not the subconscious merging of the asleep, however the conscious meeting of the awake. Early in awakening, isolation feels important and even noble. You are seeing via illusions others still trust. You're feeling things others can't feel. You're knowing matters others don't know. How are you going to probable hook up with folks that are asleep? But Jung watched this non-secular superiority slowly dissolve in folks who endured growing. They ceased the diffused arrogance of being greater aware. They ceased the identification of being the awoke one, many of the slumbering. They stopped the isolation that was in reality defensive them from intimacy. A woman who'd spent years in religious solitude told Jung, "I notion I used to be on my own due to the fact I used to be too aware for others. Then I realized I was by myself because I was afraid. Scared of being seen in my humanity, my struggles, my very non-enlightened moments. My spiritual isolation became genuinely religious delight. As she stopped this isolation, something beautiful occurred. She located she should hook up with anyone, now not via reducing her awareness, but by embracing her humanity. She may be with unconscious human beings without judgment due to the fact she diagnosed her own unconscious styles. She should love asleep humans due to the fact she remembered her personal sleep." Jung documented that proper non-secular maturity leads to what he called aware relationship, the capacity to attach without merging, love without attachment, be intimate without losing self, share truth without preaching, be collectively in aloneness. The quitting of isolation would not imply returning to unconscious social patterns. It method locating the ones uncommon others who also are quitting. Quitting approval in search of, quitting specialness, quitting overall performance, quitting actuality, quitting blame, quitting bypassing, and with these people developing something new, aware network. As we attain the give up of this journey via what surprisingly non-secular humans end, Jung would need you to apprehend something essential. This quitting isn't loss, it is liberation. Each thing you release creates space for something greater genuine to emerge. When you end looking for approval, internal really worth emerges. When you quit being special, proper forte emerges. When you quit appearing happiness, proper pleasure emerges. Whilst you stop wanting actuality, awareness emerges. Whilst you give up blame, strength emerges. When you stop bypassing, embodiment emerges. When you cease isolation, real connection emerges.